Hey everyone, my name is Lily. I'm the Office and Billing Manager here at Community Health Resource Center. Thank you for joining us for the third and final session of our Chronic Kidney Disease and Nutrition series. In today's presentation, we will be putting it all together with a discussion of long-term strategies for CKD management. Elena will talk about applying nutrition guidance to daily life with practical meal planning strategies and tips for sustainable behavior change. She will also focus on integrating dietary approaches with positive lifestyle changes for comprehensive, long term CKD management and improved quality of life. I'd like to thank our partner, the National Kidney Foundation, for helping make this series possible. And before we get started, I just wanted to share a little bit about our organization for those who haven't joined our programs in the past. Community Health Resource Center is a nonprofit organization here in San Francisco. We were established nearly 40 years ago by doctors at California Pacific Medical Center to provide resources and care that would supplement their work with patients to support their overall health and well being. Today, we provide four main areas of service: social work, nutrition counseling, community health screenings, and health education. And this series is a culmination of two of our areas of service. So that's nutrition counseling and health education. This week, we're continuing our series with Elena Zidaru, registered dietitian and the director of our nutrition team. She's passionate about working in the outpatient setting and supporting her clients achieve their health goals. She provides individualized nutrition counseling for weight loss and disease prevention, as well as management of various medical conditions such as cancer, diabetes, chronic kidney disease, gastrointestinal disorders, cystic fibrosis, and more. Elena's goal is to meet clients where they are and help them set realistic, achievable goals for lasting health behavior change. And just as a reminder, the information provided in this presentation is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional medical advice. I'd now like to pass it along to Doris Liu from National Kidney Foundation to introduce herself and share more about their organization.
Great, thank you so much. And let me share my screen. Share. Oh, share. Okay, there we go. So a little bit about the National Kidney Foundation. Our main goal is very simple: to save lives. So we do that through three main focuses: eliminating preventable kidney disease, accelerating innovation, and dismantling structural inequity so that everybody has equal access to to kidney care, dialysis, and transplantation. And oh, let me forward that. Oh, there we go. We have a nutrition hub. You can get there by going to kidney.org/nutrition. And when you're there, you will see this page. Lots of information there, a lot of subtopics on nutrition. I just want to highlight the recipe section because if you go there, you can go right to your profile. You can select whatever applies to you, whether you're someone who has diabetes and CKD or not, whatever works for you. And oh, went by, and available in Spanish as well. On to the next slide. We have our NKF Cares line, which is where you ask questions about anything related to kidney care, kidney disease, and so forth. NKF Peers is where you can connect with somebody who has been there, whether it's a kidney patient, a dialysis patient, a living donor, a care partner, whether you have a list of questions that you want to talk to somebody for one-time conversation or ongoing support, that is there for you. I want to talk a little bit more about online communities. Here's an example. I went there today. We have lots of different communities. There's one on kidney disease, one on kidney dialysis, transplant, parents of children with kidney disease. I went there today and visited and found somebody asking about family cooking. So, for example, this person was asking, how do you manage a diet for CKD when cooking for yourself? Do you cook two separate meals or do you just try to make do? So, a lot of people chimed in on that and shared about their own experience. Kidney Learning Center, we have one where you can learn about all different topics: kidney disease education, to dialysis, to transplant, finding a living donor after transplant, and more. Available also in Spanish. And then the kidney walk. We have one throughout the country, many, and so you can go to kidneywalk.org to find one near you. I think most of our audience is from Northern California, and so I just want to share that we have our kidney walk at PayPal Park in San Jose every summer. So be on the lookout for that. Just go to kidneywalk.org. If you share with us your email address, we can share with you more about that. So it is an amazing venue. And you can go there. And two things I want to highlight about that. Let me just make sure we can pause this. I don't want to keep forwarding. But anyway, two questions I get asked a lot is, oh, so sorry. This just advances. Two questions I get asked a lot is, well, I can't do the whole 5K that's typical of a lot of walks. You don't have to, because at PayPal Park, it is we do laps around the concourse. So whether you do 12 laps or one lap is completely up to you, or you can just stay back at the village and hang out with me. Lots of information at kidney.org, and you can go to whatever fits your profile and get more information. And last thing is, I just want to thank Sutter Health CPMC for supporting today's program, and we partner with them for lots of our programs. So thank you so much. And back to you, Lily.
Wonderful. Thank you, Doris. I will go ahead and pass it along to Elena to get into today's presentation.
Thank you so much. Welcome back, everyone, for our last session, last class, actually, out of the series for CKD and Nutrition. So today, we're going to focus more on nutrition and kind of how to put all those diet recommendations into a plan. We're going to go over like how to read the nutrition labels and more practical things about serving sizes and some meal ideas. And we're going to talk at the end, planning and tips on behavior change, which they're always helpful for people. Especially, we all know dietary changes are not as easy. And the benefits of physical activity, which is also very helpful. Being more physically active can help your kidneys stay healthy, can help the rest of the body. Reducing risk of cardiovascular disease. If you have diabetes, will reduce also your blood sugar and blood pressure if you have blood pressure. So the benefits of physical activity are actually numerous, and I don't have enough words to say how much it can help, but we can talk a bit about that too, how to become more physically active. So I'm going to go a little bit faster. So this is a little bit of review of the recommended diet patterns for CKD that we talked last week already about, a heart healthy diet or a DASH diet. Remember, dietary approaches to stop hypertension. So if you have blood pressure and that's the main cause for your kidney disease, that would be a good dietary plan, right? Dietary pattern to follow, a DASH diet. Mediterranean diet, if you also have risk of heart disease or already some heart disease on top of your CKD, that would be also a good diet plan for you. A diabetes-friendly diet, still more plant-based, but that will focus a little bit more if you have diabetes and CKD to help you lower your carbohydrates and your blood sugar. And then we talked about the plateau and plafond last week, plant-based diet, and one is just kind of for general people and one is more for people with diabetes, so they will have a component of carbs. So they're all, you'll see there are overlaps and similarities, but there are also some small differences. And in the end, I tell people you could choose whatever works best for you, and also depending on what other things are going on besides the CKD. The DASH diet, again, dietary approaches to stop hypertension. It's also the one that has been recommended by the National Kidney Foundation, lowers sodium. So the focus is on lowering sodium in people's diet. So really emphasizes more cooking at home, not eating out, not eating processed foods, more whole foods, increasing fruits and vegetable consumption, focusing more on whole grains and lean protein foods. Those could be like chicken, fish, eggs for animal protein, and then plant-based protein. The Mediterranean diet is pretty similar, but we'll have, like, as you see, the base of pyramid will include here plant-based foods, focuses a little bit more on olive oil and avocado, so healthy fats. Nuts and seeds too, herbs and spices that have anti-inflammatory properties and cooking with those. But from a lean protein perspective, they prioritize fish and shellfish, and then some chicken and cheese and eggs. You could see here moderate portions to daily to weekly, so maybe not every day, or maybe every day but in smaller amounts. And then at the top of the pyramid we have meat and sweets less often, so those are more think about treats on a weekend kind of situation versus on a daily regular basis. We have here a glass of wine in moderation. Of course, if you choose not to drink, probably that would be better, but it's part of the Mediterranean diet, and very important here at the base of the pyramid. So you move more physically active, and you're eating, sitting at the table in a mindful way, sharing meals with other people. So this is the big things that are emphasized with the, these are the big things emphasized with the Mediterranean diet. Diabetes, my plate recommendation. So this is something that controls the carbs. It's still plant-based, as we talked and showed last time. 75% plant-based, but just 25% of the plate the carb. This is another version of the same dietary patterns. So this can help reducing, it keeps the protein on the lower side, it keeps the carb control, gives you more vegetables and more calories, especially for also people that need to lose weight, control blood sugar, and slow down the progression of CKD. So, you know, overall, it's a bit redundant, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but you want to increase the consumption of nutrient-based foods, more whole foods derived from plants, and limit the consumption of animal-based foods and also processed foods, the one with added phosphates and things we talked last time. We talked about, it's clear, it's beneficial, it's been studied, can slow GFR decline, can help basically control better your blood sugar, blood pressure. So we talked about those things last week, just a quick review, and the conclusion is that the plant-based diet is beneficial for CKD. As a reminder, and I saw in the question a question that actually I would like to clarify, but the phytates in plant-based foods can bind phosphorus, can also bind potassium, that are naturally occurring in foods, right? We talk about high phosphorus foods as being nuts and beans and protein foods in general, like meat, chicken, fish, whole grains, and dairy products. High potassium foods are also all the protein foods that I mentioned, but a bunch of other fruits and vegetables, you know, tomatoes and oranges and potatoes and spinach and sweet potatoes. There are lots of high potassium foods, avocados and bananas. But the phytates in those foods that have, they're plant-based, can actually bind the phosphorus and some potassium, and you're not really absorb them. So when you bind them in your GI tract, you basically, they bind, they attach, and they're getting flushed out of the body, and eliminated through your stool, through your bowel movement. So they end up in your colon and exit your body that way. So they never they don't get absorbed as much in the blood. I mean, some of it will, but those phytates will decrease the absorption of potassium and phosphorus from foods. And that means less potassium and phosphorus will end in your blood. That will be less ending in your, being processed by your kidneys. that the kidneys that are not working as well cannot really get rid of them through urine as much. And a big problem with more advanced stages of CKD will be that those phosphorus and potassium will kind of get accumulated in your blood, right? Because they can be secreted through urine. So the whole idea is that the plant-based foods that are not highly processed, such as fresh vegetables and whole grains, have phytates, and those phytates will actually help to not absorb as much the phosphorus and potassium. And as I said, that will prevent the damage that can happen when we absorb too much and our kidneys cannot flush them out. So I hope that clarifies some of the question there was and was for today. I want to get into the nutrition label because I think it's important, especially as I'm talking about eating more whole foods. We're still going to probably buy foods that have a nutrition label, they're packaged. And it's good to kind of know what to look for, things like certain nutrients of concern that would be for CKD. So the first step here, I want to emphasize how important it is to understand the serving size. That serving size that's here, 1 cup. That's not what you should eat or what maybe your dietitian recommends to eat. The serving size is what the manufacturer tells you. Those numbers that I'm listing here for saturated fat, for sodium, for fiber, for calories are based on this serving size. So if you're going to eat double, you multiply by 2. If you're going to eat half, you're going to divide those numbers by 2, right? And you might sometimes have to eat less depending on your dietary goals. Or sometimes you could eat more because you don't have any restrictions for certain things, such as carbs. You don't have diabetes. You could eat, let's say, 2 cups of this product, but you have to know that then you need to do the math. So that's very important because each time you look at the label, you kind of figure out, are those numbers good for me based on how much I'm going to eat out of this product? It is a little bit tricky because sometimes the serving sizes are little and the numbers look good. And you don't realize that, oh, actually, I'm eating 3 times more because I'm eating the whole package. So I need to multiply by 3. So those numbers are not as small as I thought. So it's very important to look first here. Then you want to check the calories, especially if you're trying to lose weight or manage your weight. It's always good to know how caloric dense a food is and how many calories this will give me. Then the ones in yellow here is the ones you kind of want to limit. We don't want high numbers. And, you could see some are listed in grams, some in milligrams. It can be confusing, especially if you're not very trained in like knowing sodium is in milligrams and saturated fat is in grams and how much it would be too much. If you don't know the exact recommendations and you don't have those clearly in your head, that could be a little bit overwhelming if you look at the numbers of grams and milligrams. I suggest glancing at the percentages. And the rule of thumb is that 5% or less means low in that nutrient. 20% or more means high in that nutrient. So for example, if I'm glancing at saturated fat 15%, okay, that for me is like not 20 or more, but not 5 or less. It's actually a moderate high, right? Because it's getting close to 20. I'm looking at sodium, 20%. Okay, that's high. So it's high in sodium and it's moderate high in saturated fat. Well, we talk about managing sodium, lowering sodium if you have CKD and high blood pressure, lowering saturated fat if you have heart disease. So ideally, we don't want those numbers. We want 5% or less, or we want maximum 10%, something like maybe like a low medium. So that those sometimes would be easier to glance at and make a decision how good this product is for you. And then that will also tell you, basically, should I try to look for another brand, for another product that kind of fits the same description, but looks better for those percentages. Then whatever is here in blue, those are nutrients that we want actually high percentage, like dietary fiber. We want more fiber in general in our diet. And so we want more 20% or more, or at least 15, or, not 5% or less, or in this case, 0. And then vitamins and minerals, of course, we want those depending on our needs, especially let's say, calcium, this gives me 20% of my calcium intake in a day, so it's a good source of calcium, and I need to make sure I'm eating enough calcium. So those would be the ones that we want more versus these are the ones that we want less. If we look on the other side here, 2/3 of a cup of this product will have 5% saturated fat, sodium 7%. So those percentages are much better, right? Like those are, 5, 7, they're low in saturated fat, they're low in sodium. Dietary fiber, 16% is not high or more, but it's moderate high. So this seems like a good product overall, right? Whatever this is, I don't know, you don't know, but you just judge it based on those nutrients. So I kind of said here, of course, for people that are more savvy, less or equal to 140 milligrams of sodium per serving is low sodium. Again, it's easier to just look at the percentage. Ingredients that have sodium will have names in the ingredient list, such as salt, sodium, or soda, part of their name. And I have an example here, with this product that has potatoes, soybean oil, whey, salt, dry milk solids, garlic salt, butter, monosodium glutamate, or MSG, dried oregano, sodium citrate, artificial flavors. So we basically underline the names that signal actually sodium. And there are 4 of them out of 11. So you could tell even by looking at that probably that sodium percentage is higher. I want to kind of go through a little bit more examples here. This is sharp cheddar cheese, 1 slice is the serving. I mean, if you eat that in a sandwich, just knowing it's 20% saturated fat, so it's high saturated fat, it's expected, it's cheese. Sodium, 6%, not as bad. Has 5 grams of protein. If you're also, that will add to your protein budget. And then, not much potassium. If you're watching the potassium, it gives you some calcium. So overall, now I say cheese, it's in a way a whole food, can be beneficial, has some good nutrients. It's high in saturated fat. It's how much you're eating, right? So cheese is that kind of food that you need to manage, like how much you're eating, what other foods are you eating with it. For example, if you put a slice of cheese in a sandwich that has salami or some other processed meats that are also high in saturated fat, probably would not be like the best addition, right? Because then you add more saturated fat to your lunch sandwich versus, let's say you put a slice of cheddar with hummus and some maybe some roasted grilled vegetables or marinated vegetables, and you make this sandwich. I mean, in that context, it's not that much saturated fat for a meal, right? Because you're eating it with more plant-based foods and not other sources of high saturated fat. And you're not adding extra sodium. The deli meats usually have way more than the cheese, In an ounce, you can have up to 300, 500, 600 milligrams of sodium. So it's important to kind of look at the context. What other things are you eating? So I'm not saying to completely cut the cheese out of your diet, but definitely will have to be moderation, an ounce a day, that kind of food. So this is more like a processed food, right? It's a frozen lasagna and has, 30% saturated fat per serving, which is a cup. So there are 2 servings per container. That means half of this package will be the numbers that we talk about. So 30% saturated fat, 25% sodium. And then, not much fiber. The carbs also, if you need to count them, protein 14 grams. So we'll add to your protein budget depending on, it's going to be mainly from, obviously from animal products, this 14 grams of protein. So again, based on what we talked last week, maybe not the best choice, right, to have a meal. You could have half of a serving to lower the numbers, and maybe with some cooked vegetables on the side or a salad on the side, and that could make it more a little bit better. But in general, I kind of wanted to make the point that in general would be better to cook from whole foods and eat less processed foods, because those numbers are going to be pretty high when it comes to sodium mainly, but also saturated fat and protein. So I have this special slide because a lot of people ask me in general, how to lower sodium when you cook at home. Well, you use less salt, you use, instead of garlic salt, garlic powder. And we talked a bit about that last week. But with Asian cuisine, it's a little bit more difficult, because there are definitely a lot of sauces that are part of the cultural dishes that it kind of plays into the signature taste of the dish, right? High sodium sauces such as soy sauce, fish sauce, oyster sauce, black bean sauce, chili sauce, variety of them are pretty high in sodium. So there's always the option to use lower sodium alternatives, especially we all know for soy sauce and fish sauce, they exist and they're available. Also, gradually add smaller amounts of this sauce in your food to allow your taste buds to become more sensitive to salt. And that's something I try to tell everybody, that it's something that happens. So our taste buds, we make new ones every 3 weeks. So they're short, they have a short life cycle. We recycle them quite fast in our body. So every 3 weeks, we make new ones. So in a month or two, if you continue to lower your sodium intake, your new taste buds will kind of get used with less sodium. And a lot of people that I work with tell me this, and it's the same with sugar and salt. When you cut back on, it's a little bit difficult at the beginning as you train your taste buds, which means the new ones are not used with that much sodium or sugar. Once you kind of have at one point a high sodium or high sugar food, you feel overwhelmed. You feel like, oh, this is so salty, or oh, this is so sweet, because again, your new taste buds are not going to be used. So there's some adaptation that happens with our taste buds, and it's good to remember. And that happens also throughout our life cycle. Our taste buds change, and they change a lot. So it's important to, as you gradually add small, understanding that you could train them and you could get used with less sodium in your diet, in your food. Use more spices and condiments such as garlic, ginger, green onion, cilantro, star anise. We have the Szechuan peppercorn, the black pepper, white pepper, sesame seed, sesame oil. I mean, sesame oil has so much flavor. When adding a little bit, kind of gives a nice flavor to the food. It's even a small amount, right? 5-spice, rice vinegar or black vinegar, bullhead barbecue sauce, mushroom seasoning. All those actually can create more of a umami experience, that taste, that flavor, that it's pretty satisfying without having to use that much salt. Some people try the coconut aminos as an alternative to soy sauce. And for some people works. They get used to, they like it. It kind of does the trick. And some of the coconut aminos can have only 90 milligrams of sodium per teaspoon, which is about 1/3 less than the soy sauce. So there are ways to kind of work around to cut back on the sodium. Especially, I was telling people, eat more at home, cook at home. But if you Caucasian dishes, just remember this would be something to pay attention to, cutting back on the sodium. I have here some examples of the Xinjiang vinegar, black vinegar, or bullhead barbecue sauce. And if you look, I think you could see better here the sodium, 55 milligrams only per 1 tablespoon. So it can save quite a bit compared with soy sauce that, you know, that's in the 600s, and even the low sodium one has about 300. So if you can find alternatives, then you could play with those to add, and if it's coconut aminos or those, to add the flavor and the kind of taste experience that you're looking for, you could save quite a bit of sodium. Phosphorus and nutrition label. We talked last time about phosphor additives. The word phosph is what you're looking for. You have listed here all the possible food additives that can have phosphates in it, from decalcium phosphate, disodium phosphate, monocalcium phosphate, etc. I'm not going to read all of them, but you get the idea. They're all, I bold the phos name, the phos kind of part of the word. So that's your indication that those are phosphate additives. And as you remember from last week, those are in the 90% or up absorbability. So they're highly absorbable compared with the naturally occurring phosphates in foods. So important to try to read the nutrition label. So here we have Signature Select pancake mix, and we have a couple of the sodium aluminum phosphate and monocalcium phosphate. That's how you find them. I mean, even the Vans frozen waffles, they're gluten-free, they're high in fiber, they're low in sugar. They're overall kind of good on the nutrition label, but be aware they have the monocalcium phosphate and the sodium acid pyrophosphate in them. So they have phosphate. So how often, how much you're using them, maybe not on a daily basis. Some tips for people with a sweet tooth. I know this is a challenge for some of us. You can use in moderation. Now, depending if you have diabetes or not, you could be more careful versus a little bit more relaxed. Not to say that, you know, if you don't have diabetes, you should eat as much sugar as you want. Sugar should be consumed in moderation in general, regardless if you have CKD or diabetes or not. But if you have diabetes and you need to be more careful in managing your blood sugar, definitely you could use in moderation some sugar alternatives such as stevia, monk fruit. So the sugar substitutes, those are sugar substitutes that are derived from plants, and they tend to have, I mean, so far at least, there are not that many studies to show they could affect our health in more negative ways compared with artificial sweeteners that are a little bit more controversial. So those are the ones made in a lab, like sucralose, which is Splenda, or aspartame, or acesulfame K, or even the sugar alcohols. They have, I mean, they're more natural things like maltitol, xylitol, sorbitol. So they're sugar alcohol, but lately they've been associated with erythritol specifically was associated with some blood clotting issues, and then they also can change your gut microbiome and create more gas, more bloating. And if you have a sensitive GI system, you have to be mindful of that, because there have been studies showing that those sugar alcohols, when you consume them regularly and quite a bit, they will change the balance in your microbiome. And the same with artificial sweeteners, they have an impact on your gut microbiome. And let's say if you have diabetes and you use a lot of artificial sweeteners, that actually is being shown that you don't control your blood sugar as well, because of those changes in the gut microbiome that will make your insulin hormone not working as well. So there are different mechanisms that we have, as I said, the evidence that they're not that great for us. So I always say, be mindful, use in moderation, and stick with the kinds that so far did not show much in terms of negative effects on health, like stevia, monk fruit. Those are more sugar substitutes because they're derived from plants. Find desserts that can be satisfying in smaller portions, right? And that would be a little bit of a trial and error, looking what's available based on what you like, trying to look at those nutrition labels and see how much of added sugar per serving, what's a serving, and trying to see if you find satisfying desserts that you can consume in smaller portion without getting as much sugar. Try to make your own sweets and desserts so you have more control over the ingredients and how you sweeten and how much sweetener you put and what kind of sweetener you put, right? You could use some monk fruit or stevia. Have sometimes lower potassium fruit instead of dessert. And I say lower potassium not for everyone. Some people can have higher potassium fruit as part of dessert, but some they need to be, if they have high levels of potassium in their blood already, they need to. But I always say focus on the fruits that have lower potassium as an alternative for dessert. Try some CKD-friendly, healthier alternative for dessert, such as chia pudding made with a milk alternative. And another example is like a microwave tiny sliced apples with cinnamon, sprinkle on top a little sweetener. Smells like an apple pie, can be satisfying if you like apple pies. Homemade fruit popsicles with lower potassium fruits if you need to manage the potassium. So there are some options that could be considered. And moving forward at the different types of milk alternatives, because I talk about the chia pudding with a milk alternative. So some of the, like the cow's milk, regular milk, now depending, right, of, you could get a low fat if you're watching saturated fat because of heart disease. It is high in protein, gives you about 8 grams per glass. And then has definitely more phosphorus and potassium too. But again, you might not need to watch those. However, the protein is something that adds to the budget. So depending on how much you like milk, how you drink it, how you have it, may not be all the time a good alternative. And I have here some other types of plant-based milk, soy milk and rice and coconut and almond and cashew and oat. So I think those are all of them that are available. I don't have the hemp milk included here, but I think that's the only one that's missing. But basically, they compare them in terms of calories, protein, phosphorus, and potassium. So again, depending on how you use those, how's your protein budget, how big it is, or do you want to use it for milk versus no, I want to save it for more foods. You might want to choose things like, I see here, rice milk has a good kind of, not much protein at all, not much potassium, not much phosphorus. Even the cashew milk, right, looks pretty good too, but we didn't have available the phosphates. And actually, the ones with the asterisks contain added phosphates, those brands. So that's kind of a minus. So I guess the rice milk here is the winner if you have to kind of watch all of them. If you don't have to watch all of them and you're just maybe don't want to consume your protein budget with the milk, then maybe you put in your coffee, it's not even part of a meal. You might consider any of those, right? You could see they're half the protein, or even less. So just kind of wanted to make you aware of what alternatives you might have to cow's milk if you need to watch all those nutrients of concern. Portion sizes, now we talked about cheese, but an ounce of cheese, it's 7 grams of protein, so it can be part of your total budget. Sodium, it's different. Remember, the one I show you was more like 140. Some can be up to 180, but some can be up to 480. So it can vary quite a bit. That's why the kind of cheese matter. Like, try to look, obviously, when we buy cheese, it's gonna come with the nutrition label, so we can have and look at that information. Not much potassium in cheese, and phosphorus is somewhere kind of, can be a bit less or can be a bit more, but overall, if it's portion control, 1 ounce can be part of your diet. And this 1 ounce, it's like in pictures, they show you, I mean, it can be the size and the thickness of a cheese stick or one slice, the one that I showed you. And if they're smaller kind of snack sizes, about 3 of those would be 1 ounce. Portion sizes for meat, chicken, animal protein, it's about 3. Remember, I said a deck of cards, the size and the thickness of a deck of cards can be your palm without the fingers, right? Depending on how big the hands look like. And you could see here how the chicken can look. Those are thinly sliced. So, if you put them all together, they're thicker, and they're the size of a deck of cards. And salmon protein is going to be about 21 grams because it's basically 7 grams per serving. Sodium is pretty low unless, if cooked without salt. Basically, that's the natural occurring sodium in a piece of animal protein, which is not much. But if you cook it, depending on what you put on it, it's going to have more or less. Be aware of the pieces of protein that are already marinated in the store. I think I mentioned last time, it's better to marinate your own piece of protein to save sodium, because the ones store-bought are pretty high in sodium. And then we have potassium, it's technically in the high because it's over 200, but it's, again, not as bad. And then phosphorus, again, because it's a protein food. But not everybody needs to, as I mentioned, if you're managing the protein intake, you don't have to worry about the phosphorus as much. Portion sizes, half a cup of cooked beans. That could be, your handful with the fingers. Looks kind of like that on the plate. You have 7 grams. This is going to be a plant-based protein. You have 7 grams in half a cup. No sodium. If cooked without salt, they don't have naturally occurring sodium. Or if it's canned with no salt added, it's not going to have any sodium. Potassium, it's higher, and phosphorus, not as much, but still, remember I said this phosphorus, because of the phytates and the fiber in beans that are pretty high, it's not going to get absorb all of it. Nuts, 1 ounce would be the serving. That's 1/4 cup, so that's a handful with no fingers, kind of more the inside here. And it looks different with different nuts based on the size of the nuts. You have examples here, how many pieces of nuts in a 1/4 cup. You don't have to count them. I usually like to eyeball and estimate, but being aware that it's somewhere between 5 to 7 grams in 1/4 cup of nuts. Sodium, again, if no salt added, not as much. Even the ones that have salt added, you'll notice their percentages, the way I taught you to look at the percentages today, they're not going to be as high. So that's the good thing. I'm not saying necessary to buy unsalted nuts all the time. You could have, some are like really lightly salted, and their sodium per serving, which is 1/4 cup, would be probably sometimes 60 or 80 milligrams of sodium. So it's would be under that 5% that we talked about. So not a big difference. And then potassium, they're kind of, some are a bit lower, some a bit higher. Phosphorus, just as the beans will have, but they're also high in fiber and phytates, so not very absorbable. But portion size matter, right? Like portion size will matter because they're caloric dense. They will add the protein that you're trying to kind of manage. And they're not, that they have healthy fats and other food benefits, but that doesn't mean, we could eat a full cup or a full bag of nuts every day. That would not be good. I want to talk a little bit about meal planning. Meal planning is important, CKD or not. It's part of a kind of healthy eating behaviors, right? Will keep us actually more focused on especially when you have a diet plan that could feel a bit more restrictive, and it's like, okay, Elena said I need to watch my protein, I need to watch my sodium, possibly I need to watch my potassium, my phosphorus. We'll have to, it makes sense that you will make your life easier if you plan ahead, right? It helps you be able to cook more at home and lower your sodium this way. And just can make you save time, make you more likely to make better food choices. And that's valid for anybody, regardless if they need to, as I said, to follow a diet or not. When we plan our meals, when our meals are more predictable and planned, we tend to make better choices versus if we just kind of wait until we're hungry and then try to figure out what to eat. Usually your brain will tell you things, eat more, it will tell you eat differently, right? That salad now becomes a sandwich, and then you want a big one, you don't want just half because you're hungry and you think you need more food. In reality, our stomach feels full with the same amount of food, regardless if you're hungry or not, right? Like the stomach size is not going to change. Our eyes and our brain and the perception that happens in the brain, it's going to be different. You're going to think, oh, I need to eat more. And basically, when you're not prepared, then you wait until you're hungry to make those food decisions. That's a easier kind of path to overeating. It can happen very easily. So the first steps to plan a kidney-friendly diet, you want to have a regular grocery shopping day, at least once a week. So make sure you make time to go to the store. Don't wait until you run out of food completely. Have a designated day in a week. And when you shop, make sure you kind of shop enough to last, so you have food and fresh produce on hand until the next shopping trip. So it would be easier if you keep that day kind of the same. Let's say it's a Saturday, or let's say it's a Monday, whatever works for your schedule. Then I always say, see what's already in the house, think about what you're gonna want to eat for next week, see what you still have available on hand. Ask other household members for meal ideas. Always try to kind of talk that through. Be realistic about your time, how much pre-cooked versus raw foods versus leftovers. Maybe you need to buy pre-chopped for some vegetables if you feel like, okay, I'm going to cook them, but it's going to be much easier if I don't have to peel them and chop them and start from scratch. That's okay to take shortcuts, whatever works for you. Reuse items for multiple meals. Let's say you roasted a bunch of chicken. You're not going to eat it all. You could have portion control amounts of protein throughout the week in different ways, right? That chicken can be part of the salad, can be shredded to put in a wrap, or can be used kind of on the side with other foods like cooked vegetable and cooked starch. Try some batch cooking, freezing extras, so you have maybe some food on a week when you might not have as much time to cook, and that's totally okay. Especially soups work very well because it's so easy to make. It takes the same amount of time to make a big batch of soup than a small batch of soup. So make a bigger batch of soup, freeze half of it, and then the other half you could eat it in the next few days, right? So it's not too overwhelming. And becoming an expert at reading a nutrition label, right? The way I said, you don't have to spend hours to look at that. It can be overwhelming, but we talked today about how to, in a few seconds, decide, is this a good product for me or not? And I tell people a lot of times we're curious. It's a new product. We want to try it. But I always say, look at the nutrition label. And if it passes the nutrition label test, buy it, take it home, try it, see if you like it. If it's going to pass the taste test too, well, you have the winner, right? A double plus, you found a good product versus now, if it doesn't pass the nutrition test and it's too high in this, does it make sense to take it home and try it? The chances are you're going to like it. And then you are left with wanting to buy something that's not as good for you. So always try to kind of make those food decisions with what's good for you in mind too. I'll guarantee you there are plenty of products that look good on that nutrition label that you're gonna like and enjoy. I had here browse some for plant-based recipes. I like the couple of years or two I've been using more the Mediterranean Dish website. They have really nice recipes and they're easy to follow. They don't take a lot of time to make. So they're more practical and the pictures are beautiful, mouth-watering. So this is a good resource if you want to use. There are others too. And I know it's overwhelming if you just Google recipes for different things, like you're going to find so many. But as I said, this one I like because they're also healthier. A lot of them are healthy recipes. And they follow more the plant-based meal plan. Some tips on behavior change. As I mentioned, I'm fully aware changing diets in general, changing behaviors and routines is hard. It's not easy. I'm not underestimating that. I know people struggle quite a bit, and that's why it's very important to make it easy and work with yourself. Create some realistic, achievable goals. I mean, talking today about recommendations, last week the same, but the reality is that doesn't have to be perfect starting tomorrow, right? Like where can you start? What changes can you make that you feel good about and confident that are going to work for you? And you don't want to start with the hardest part, right? That you feel that you're not ready for, because that kind of sets you to failure. Start with things that you are confident you could stick with, that you could commit to. And then as you make changes, I promise you, your taste buds change, your attitude change, your mind frame changes, and the change will become easier. It's like moving the ball. It takes the most energy to get it move, right? To get it started. And once it's rolling and it's moving, it does not require as much energy. It uses the momentum. And it's really that what changes and behavior change. So start with something small, achievable, realistic. And then break a bigger goal into smaller goal. I have a woman like a few months ago started to work with me. She was having 5 to 6 bottles of 12-ounce Mountain Dew soda, right? So 5 to 6 bottles of 12-ounce a day. She started with, let's do 2 to 3. Now she's done to 1. And, you know, she said to me, sometimes I don't even want it in a day and I don't have it. And that's totally fine. But she took this kind of win-off approach and cut back significantly enough to not have this sugar taste kind of stimulation, because sugar is also something, the more you have it, the more you want to have it, and you perpetuates the craving, and her taste buds are more sensitive right now to sugar, to the point that she doesn't want that sweet. It feels very sweet to her. So a bigger goal, break it into smaller goals. Doesn't have to be perfect from day one. Again, a goal easier to achieve. I explained that. Use tools for accountability, professional, friends. So dietitian, me, or your friends. Like I have a client that I work with. She has a friend that she does a health challenge with. So they have their goals and they all kind of check at the end of the day via text and say, hey, did you do that? Oh, I didn't do that well. They're very honest to each other because that's how they keep accountable. And they discuss their successes and basically, I don't want to say failures because they're not failing. You know, sometimes we're not perfect, and sometimes you maybe did not do very well with the goal, and that's totally okay. But they keep themselves accountable. Journalings and apps to track food and activity, those can be helpful for some people too, and they can keep you accountable, right? So those are important. Meal planning and meal predictability, as I mentioned, this is paramount for a healthy diet, and especially for people that want to stick with the eating plan, you need to plan ahead. And that will make your life easier. Keep a clean food environment at home and work. So again, to make it easier for you, you don't want to buy all those foods that you're not supposed to be eating, because guess what you're going to buy, that's what you're going to end up eating. It's that simple, honestly. You bought more fruits, you're going to eat more fruits. You bought more cookies, you're going to eat more cookies. And that's how it works. And then have planned treats weekly. As I said, doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't mean you have to. Nobody has that perfect diet every single day, every single meal. So allow yourself some treats couple of times a week. Again, the diet pattern is what makes the difference versus the outliers. We're not gonna, harm you as much. So, but this will allow to keep your dietary plan more sustainable long term, because if you're completely restrictive, then you're going to create this diet mentality, and one day this will end, or you would like to end it one day just because so you can eat foods that you like. So it really does not work very well with the sustainability and with the idea that this is how I'm going to eat for the rest of my life. There are different ways to do meal planning for the week. Some people like to write, some people do it in their head. But if you are new to meal planning, probably would be good to have like a spreadsheet like that with the days of the week and the meals and the snacks. And again, don't think the planning all the meals for the week can be very overwhelming. And I don't feel like you need to do that. You could begin with planning 3 days. You're gonna make some leftovers so you can have coverage for other meals. And I have here that if you plan Monday, Wednesday, Friday, make enough for leftovers, then your week will be almost filled. Not entirely, but almost, right? So it would be a good starting point. And once you have the menu and you fill in some things that you think you might eat for the week, you can generate a shopping list from it, which is very nice, right? So then you have your shopping list now done. One of my tips for shopping list is what I personally do. I used to do it on a piece of paper back in the days. Now I have it in my phone under notes. I have a grocery shopping list that I always keep. And there's some staples, foods that I buy every week, right? Because I run through, like sometimes they're yogurt and milk for my son because he drinks a lot of milk. Different things that I know I need to shop weekly for, I always keep them there. I'm never erasing them, right? And then I'm adding, as I'm cooking for the week or eating certain foods, I'm running low on certain ingredients that I'm using, and then I'm gonna add them on my list already. So I kind of work throughout the week with things that I'm running either out or low on. And then at the end, towards the end of the week, when my grocery shopping day approaches, I just think like what I'm showing you right now, what I'm going to eat next week, what should I buy, what should I make? And I'm gonna basically finalize my list with ingredients that I might need for whatever I'm gonna cook. And this is less overwhelming because I have one part that never changes, then one part that I'm kind of adding a little bit throughout the week as needed. And then the last part would be kind of as I'm deciding what I'm gonna make. And it doesn't feel overwhelming. It doesn't feel like I'm spending hours, to come up with my grocery shopping list and my meal plan. There's some breakfast ideas here. Anything from some avocado toast with egg, or egg muffins with some vegetables, bell peppers, mushrooms, a multigrain cereal with some nuts and dry fruit, some fruit. And again, so those are just some examples of more plant-based. Also, again, more controlled protein, potassium-friendly fruits. Avocado is high in potassium, but as you see here, it was used just half of it for the avocado egg toast. So remember, portion size matters. Lunch, there's a chicken salad. There's some ground beef with vegetables, kind of in a pita pocket taco form. Some minestrone soup with some beans and vegetables, and pasta, primavera, with a little bit of protein, but not as much. And then dinner ideas. We have the salmon with some salad. Here we have some broccoli beef stir fried. Can be used with tofu too, for people that like tofu if you want more plant-based protein. Buckwheat garbanzo salad. So the protein will come from the grain and the garbanzo, and then a bunch of vegetables. And then here also we have the burrito bowl that has a bit of guacamole, some black beans, corn, and kimchi, fermented vegetables, some rice, and tomatoes. Nice colors. Some snack ideas. By the way, this is not an ounce of walnuts. It's very hard to go online and find pictures that are portion control, honestly. I had a hard time also with the protein portion, because most of the pictures with protein foods, the portion is way bigger than 3 ounces. So we have some zucchini bread, homemade, the celery with cream cheese, and bagel, everything but the bagel seasoning, tuna on cucumber, so some tuna salad on cucumber, and walnuts. But quarter of a cup of walnuts will not look like in the picture, as I mentioned. And now we're gonna, because I really want to move and have more time for the questions. Hopefully we can address all of them today. But the benefits of physical activity. So physical activity, I said, it's important, very important, and helps maintain a healthy body weight, lowers blood pressure, decreases the risk of heart disease, lowers blood sugar or the risk of type 2 diabetes if you don't have diabetes already, reduces the risk of certain cancers, increases muscle strength and function, improves bone health and strength, helps with mental health, and reduces the risk of dementia. So all those are the, probably even more, but those are the most important benefits of physical activity. And for exercise recommendation for CKD, we don't have special ones actually, in terms of those are just general activities, physical activity recommendations that we have for different, for different conditions. We want at least 150 minutes per week of moderate intensity or aerobic cardio activity, such as brisk walking, swimming, biking, anything that raises your heart rate. And moderate intensity, I tell people, like right now there are devices like Apple Watches or Fitbit that will track your heart rate, right? And there's a way to calculate what is moderate, but for most people it's somewhere from 95 to 120, depending on how old you are, right? But the way you also, if you don't have a device to track that, I tell people, you know, you can feel a little bit out of breath, but you could still have a conversation if you were walking with a friend, but you could not sing a song, you know, so it's a little bit out of breath, but you could still talk. At least 2 times a week, I recommend to have some muscle strengthening exercise, such as weightlifting, resistance bands, or Pilates, depending on what you prefer. But those are basically anaerobic type of exercises that will be repetitive movements of a muscle group that will create some soreness to that particular muscle, right? So it just burns at one point after a few repetitions, several repetitions. And those are important to maintain and strengthen your muscle mass. On a daily basis, interrupt sedentary behavior. Alternate periods of prolonged sitting with breaks of standing up, walking, or stretching. So every 20, 30 minutes or so would be good to just at least stand up for 2-3 minutes. They said if you can take a walk for 2-3 minutes and move around, it's even better, but at least stand, you know, because you're using those postural big muscles in your legs, in your buttocks and your back, right? Muscles. So those all will contract to keep you standing. So when we sit down, everything is kind of relaxed. Most muscles are relaxed and they're not really doing much. Ideally, at least 2 times a week, engage in some flexibility mobility exercises such as stretches, yoga, tai chi. So those will help with maintaining your mobility, your flexibility, and will support your joints and your tendons. So then when you do cardio or muscle strengthening, you're less likely to injure your body, especially after a certain age. Those are very important. Tips to increase your physical activity. Set realistic goal, the way I said with the diet too. I mean, you know, aim for less, make it realistic, start somewhere, especially if you haven't exercised in a long time. You really don't want to push your body because it's so easy to get injured and that will set you back. So set a realistic goal, start small. Some people just take the stairs instead of taking the elevator, parking further away from place so that they could walk more. There are ways just to do it in simple and make them part of your daily life so you don't have to take extra time if you don't have that. Get your friends involved. Some people have exercise buddies, walking buddies. Can be a nice way to socialize. A lot of times we socialize with friends around food and eating, and it doesn't have to be that way. We could just socialize and let's meet and exercise together. And again, it helps with that accountability too, and it's more fun. Walk part of your commute if you're working, and that's a great way. I use that a lot when I don't work from home, and it's working. Take regular breaks from sitting, as I mentioned. Try to every half an hour or so, to if you need to put a timer or if you need to put a reminder of some sort, make sure you're at least standing up for 2-3 minutes before you sit back down, and make it fun. Trying actually to find things that you like to move your body. If there's certain sports or activities that you like better than others, try to find ways to engage in those, because if you like it, it's basically something that will ensure you're going to continue doing. I have here some recipe resources. You're going to receive those in your with your slides, and thank you very much. I would love to go to the questions now.
That was wonderful. Thanks, Elena. Let me just pull up this screen and then we'll get into the Q&A. First question, what is the PRAL diet and who is it for?
Yeah, that's a good question. So PRAL stands for potential renal acid load. And I think I mentioned in maybe my first and my second series that the first or second week that I was saying a plant-based diet decreases the acid load on the kidneys. So the potential renal acid load diet, the PRAL, will basically look at trying to, it's a diet that will help you get more alkaline urine, right? Foods that will turn into more alkaline urine versus acidic. So we'll decrease the acid load. It's a little bit more involved in the sense that you see there's some list of different foods that have different acid loads. So the higher the acid load is, obviously, the more acid foods those are, and then the lower the acid load, that means they're more alkaline, so those are the ones you should eat. It can be a little bit hard to, overwhelming, right? Because you have all those lists and all those numbers, and you calculate. The bottom line is, again, their foods, the acidic, the foods that create a more acidic urine are more the animal-based foods versus the plant-based foods that are more alkaline producing. So finding that balance and doing more plant-based will help with that.
Awesome. Thanks, Elena. And do you mind talking a little bit about how to calculate caloric intake for weight loss? We have someone here who is a 60-year-old man and just curious about how he can determine the number of calories he should aim for, perhaps in a day.
Yeah, so you could use, and I'll tell you, all those formulas that calculate calories they have their margin of errors in the sense that those are going to be estimation. They take into account your height, your age, your weight, your gender, and your physical activity. So 5 factors, because those are the main drivers of metabolism, muscle mass that you have in your body, but they're not exact in the sense that they're not going to calculate your specific metabolism. And as we know, some people have a higher metabolism versus some have slower. So they have that margin of error, but it's a good starting point, and it can help you to give you a little bit of a frame. Where should I start? And I tell people, give it a try. And then if you don't lose weight, then that means it kind of overestimated for you. Maybe you have a slower metabolism. You can go a little bit lower, but not too much, maybe 200 or 300 calories lower per day, and see if you're successful with that. And that's kind of how you use them. But what you could do, you could go online. I use sometimes calculator.net, and then it's basically, they have different formulas that not just for calories, for math, for, but if you look, you're going to find, I want to say they're like calorie calculations. I want to say it's calorie calculator. So calculator.net and then calorie calculator, and they're going to ask you for age, gender. You click there, you put your height, your weight, your activity level. Again, gives you some ideas, what's sedentary, what's light, what's medium, what's moderate. And you choose based on the description which one you think you're part of, and then you click calculate, and they give you, if you want to maintain your weight, you need that many calories. If you want to lose a pound a week, you eat that many calories, so it's pretty good in giving you at least a starting point. But as I said, those are estimations, so keep that in mind. They might not work perfectly.
Great. Thanks, Elena. And then, do we know of any meal delivery services that are created for CKD nutritious foods? This one mentions in San Francisco, we have something called Cook Unity.
Yeah, I want to say there's one, I forgot the name. I'm trying to look to see if I can find it. In Oakland. Yeah, I'll have to kind of, Mom's Meals, I think it's called. Yeah, Mom's Meals. That's one for sure. And I might have to look, because maybe we could send Lily with after, because I don't want to take more time
Yeah.
right now. But mom's meals for sure. And then I'll come up with maybe a couple of more options, because I'm not sure if this was the local one in Oakland, or there's another one. I want to say it was another name. Anyhow, we'll get back to you.
Great. Thanks, Elena. Yeah, and I will include that in the question spreadsheet that I'll share with everyone. So we'll have specific links to different sources.
Yeah.
Is an electrolyte supplement like Liquid IV okay for CKD stage 4 patients? It seems to have 22% sodium that goes into 16 ounces of water. Is it recommended for travel to reduce the need to pass urine by providing hydration with less water intake?
Yeah, that will depend on the diet, right? Like I would look for potassium, especially if you need to watch potassium if your levels are on the high end or higher than normal. Sodium for sure, but now depending, right? Like if your diet is not high in sodium and you could have that part of your budget and it helps you, with hydration, if you're on a fluid restriction, I think it could work, but you need to be kind of aware of also, make that sodium from electrolytes part of your kind of sodium budget for the day. And the same with potassium. If you need to watch, like be aware of how much potassium is in. A lot of the electrolytes do not have as much potassium. Some have higher.
Okay.
Depending on the type. Yeah.
Right. Great. Thank you. Next, can a plant-based diet prevent diabetes and/or CKD?
Yeah, we talked about preventing. If you don't have those, you don't have already diabetes and CKD, it's still a healthy diet for people to follow because it's been shown to reduce risk of cancer development, of diabetes, helps managing weight, it's heart health. It's beneficial for anybody, but also if you have diabetes or CKD, as we talked about, it's what we recommend. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And I know you had a slide about this in today's presentation. This question may have come in before you got to that slide, but can you just quickly talk about what coconut amino products are?
Yeah, so coconut aminos, they're just some types of amino acids, and just the taste, I guess, it's just like a liquid that mimics a bit the soy flavor, right? And it can be a good alternative in cooking for soy sauce because it can give some of the flavor experience without the sodium. As I mentioned, some of them will have just 90 milligrams per teaspoon. Now per tablespoon would be, if you use a whole tablespoon, a lot of people that use it on a regular basis, they say they use a bit less for the taste. You don't have to use like a full tablespoon. So it's a swap for soy sauce. Again, works for some people, may not work for everybody.
Great, thank you for clarifying. This question is a follow-up from a question last week. So the question was, I tried to focus on a more plant-forward diet by using a service called Thistle, and my potassium increased too high. One of my doctors suggested focusing on high oxalate foods rather than on potassium. Do you mind talking a little bit about that?
Yes. So traditionally, we're advising more of a low oxalate diet for people that used to have recurrent kidney stones, and that can actually increase risk of CKD when you have multiple kidney stones. A lot of people that have that, they will basically they have an issue with how they metabolize the oxalate in their bodies, right? When you develop recurrent kidney stones. However, now it's been shown lately in the last few years only. There's a particular study that, research article and study that looked more at the role of the oxalate foods outside of, like, in non-stone production, so without kidney stones and CKD. And there's definitely some evidence that the oxalates can create this vicious cycle when you have CKD more advanced stages, to the point that the oxalate can create more inflammation for the kidney, so that can decline the GFR and the kidney function even more. However, it's a very complex mechanism, and it's a not very well understood process. So it's something that I did not want to include in my slides and presentation because we don't know as much about it. And another reason, even though it seems like the oxalates play a role and can exacerbate the decline of GFR, but another reason why I didn't want to include it, and maybe in the next years with this class, the information and what we know will change. But there's another reason. The reason is that the oxalate that end up being processed, that end up in our blood and being processed by our kidneys, they're like 20 and somewhere between 20 and 40% only will come from food, exogenous, right? Like outside of the body via food that we eat that's high in oxalate. Most of the oxalate, 60 to 80%, it's endogenous. That means created in our body by our liver. And again, that's what's not very well understood, how we could actually change that production of oxalate. And then a very small percentage, maybe 10% or so, it's actually from our intestines. We kind of reabsorb from the gut, right? What kind of is not absorbed in the blood, but can end up in the blood being reabsorbed from the gut. So now it's a smaller percentage from the food, and it's not, and it's less absorbed, especially when you eat it with calcium. Oxalating foods will bind. And my recommendation would be, since we don't have any clarity right now, and also we don't have enough evidence to make this CKD diet even more restrictive, my recommendation would be, if you really eat a lot of high oxalate foods, and spinach is one of the highest among all of them. So if you like spinach and you want to eat it on a regular basis, again, may not be the best leafy green. You could choose other leafy greens that have less. But if you like to sometimes have it, I would try to eat it with a calcium food, maybe with the yogurt, with a little bit of cheese, or, because the calcium really binds the oxalate. And again, you're not absorbing. And remember, only 20-40% comes from food. So that's kind of the way I would leave it for now at what we know. And it's just, we need more information.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the breakdown. Are specific foods like salmon, eggs, and goat cheese safe to eat regularly with CKD?
Yes, they are. Keep in mind they're protein foods. Keep in mind they're animal-based foods. So if you keep it within your protein budget, and about at least the other half, you could make this half animal protein, half, I said at least for most people to try to have half or more plant-based and the rest animal-based. So those can be part of your animal-based if those are your favorite animal-based proteins. But as long as you consume them in moderation, they're okay to eat for sure.
Great, thank you. I assume the answer might be similar to this one, or for this one. Someone was wondering what protein they should prioritize as a pescatarian, fish or beans and legumes?
Well, yeah, do it kind of, some will fulfill the plant-based one and the other one's the animal-based one. Yeah.
Great. Is cranberry juice recommended for CKD? Are there any benefits?
Not that I know of. I mean, cranberry juice had more research on the recurrent urinary tract infections that can help. So if you have that also on top of CKD, that could be helpful. But CKD only without the UTIs, not necessarily an extra benefit.
Got it. Thank you. And this one, I think you kind of answered it in your slides. So I'm going to say it probably is, but is stevia okay for CKD?
Yeah,
Awesome. Thank
in moderation.
you. Great. Can you drink smoothies with stage 3A CKD?
Yes, and again, watch the protein, because I know in the smoothies we could put quite a bit of protein or not. So stay within your protein budget. You could have smoothies.
Awesome. Thank you. Are there any guidelines for the percent of calories from carbs and fat if you don't have trouble with glycemic control?
Yeah, so if you don't have diabetes, the macronutrient breakdown can still be something between 50-60% of your calories can be from carbs if you don't have diabetes, right? Like you still don't want more than that, but 50 or up to 60% can come from carbohydrates. Protein somewhere between 15 to 20. Again, being on a budget for protein, you could use more what I showed you for CKD. So that's going to be probably on a more 15%, so low, and then the rest can be the fat. And again, the rest can be either if you do, either 35 or 25, right? Depending on how much carbs you're using.
Okay, great. And last week, I know you briefly talked about what an acid finish is. Can you review that?
Yeah, I would say, well, an acid finish, it's a term that's used more in cooking. So when you have an acid finish, it's like you're adding the acid will added to the food will just create this taste and increase palatability and improve the taste and the eating experience, basically. And I was talking in the sense of salt is not the only thing that can stimulate your taste buds and create a good taste experience. You could do that with an acid finish. That means at the end of cooking, you, let's say, put a little bit of lemon juice, and that could actually create on your palate some flavors and taste experience that can be satisfying and without needing to add more salt to create that.
Awesome. Thanks for reviewing that. And I think that brings us to the end. Unfortunately, we are at time for today. Um, just wanted to thank everyone for joining us here at Community Health Resource Center and National Kidney Foundation for this presentation. And thank you again to Elena for leading this wonderful series. It's been a pleasure to be a part of it. I hope everyone has a great evening.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.